Hey, look at this. I'm actually getting people in the chat. Lee, is this another stream? It is. Yes. Yes, it is, Lee. Okay. Let's see. All right. Okay. Hi, Lee. Like I can go like this. Like add to broadcast. Watch this. Here we go. You see that?
Okay, now I see two streams.
All right. Great. So.
Okay, now, all right. I see me in the new stream.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Perfect, fantastic. Hi, Mark. How you doing? Welcome to this. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, this is awesome. Very awesome. We are actually working it from the eCam live here. Finally,
Dave, are you on the Skype call?
Dave needs to call back in. Hello, everybody. Hi. Yes, it's working. I believe it is working. Perfect. And happy to be here. Hi. Wait, I'll say hello real quick. I think I can switch over and say, hey, hi, everybody. Thanks for being here so much. And Dave is calling in, so let me get him to add to this conversation. Hello, David. How are you? And welcome to the show.
Hi.
What would you like to say about Steve while everyone's getting back into the room here? We're so lucky to have him.
Well,
He's an amazing person.
I think it's always good to let people start showing up. I think people are starting to show up now, and I don't have a lot to say because people say I sound echoey anyway.
Oh, really?
So. Well, maybe that's been fixed, but I think this was the smart thing for you to reboot. But I'm going to say that it was really funny, my first contact with Steve, because, Steve, are you there? Can you hear me?
Let me get him in here. I have to add him. Hold on a second. We lost our guest. Steve, you wily person. Come on in here. Here we go. Here he is. Great. I think he'll be here. And great. How awesome. Look at this. I think we've done it, boys. Hi, everybody. Thank you for bearing with us. Today we have amazing Steve Outtrim here, thanks to Dave Acton, who introduced us. Steve is amazing.
So it's Linda.
Yes?
So put the camera on you. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I don't want to take up a lot of time. I'll listen and chime in. But it doesn't really matter. Why don't you just, here's what I would do. I would ask Steve to introduce himself.
Well, I'm going to do that. And are we seeing Steve on here, people? Or
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Okay, Steve, please introduce yourself because I can't do nearly as good a job.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Just want to make sure there's no audio problems.
Does everybody hear him?
I hear him on Skype.
Okay. You guys all hear him?
Okay, great.
Okay.
Well, so yeah, my name is Steve Outtrim. My channel on YouTube is called Crypto Beast, and I also have a blog called burners.me. And I'm a technology entrepreneur from New Zealand. I made a program called Hot Dog in the 1990s, which made it very easy for people to make web pages, just as the World Wide Web was exploding. And it was actually the third most downloaded software in the whole internet in 1997. I took the company public when I was 23, and then I retired at 26. After a couple of years bumming around the world, I became a tech investor and got back in the industry again, and I did that for probably about 15 years. Retired again to work on research, and I originally planned to write a book, but I found that this new format of YouTube and mixing it with PowerPoint presentations, kind of like George Webb does with his PowerPoint presentations, except mine are linked to hyperlinks and references, and you go back and see the evidence that backs up everything I say. But this is a new format in research. It's sort of a hybrid of books and videos together. So that's what I've been trying to do, and I produced a series called The Shadow History of Burners with Jan Irvin, looking at Burning Man but also Silicon Valley and the role that the Silicon Valley technology industry has played in manufacturing the counterculture that we all have to live with.
Wow, amazing. You guys are saying you guys are a little loud, just or overmodulated. Let me see if I can fix that somehow. on my side.
So Linda, what I'm going to do is when Steve's talking, I'm just going to put my phone on mute. And so we might have to do that when somebody else is talking. You might have to put your microphone on mute or something like that.
Okay.
I think that's what they're referring to.
Okay, gotcha. No problem. Okay, so, all right, I got this. This isn't my first rodeo, but yeah, I do understand. Okay, now, Steve, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, there's so much that people want to talk about, but personally, I would love to know how you made your money.
I think that's a great topic to talk about in your channel because you talk about manifesting, right, Linda?
Yes, I do talk about manifesting.
And I'm personally a huge believer in that, and it's worked for me extremely, extremely well in my life. And, I also believe in karma, and I've always tried to be a very good person since I was a young kid and do good things for others, unconditionally, just because it's the right thing to do. And having lived a life like that, I've been incredibly, incredibly blessed with good luck. And, some of that energy has been directed towards wealth creation, but the time when I actually made the most money, or the times in my life where I made the most money, was when I was making money for other people. And that, they made more money than me. They made money off of me and through my efforts, but also by backing me and investing in me. And so, the business that I've been in is about, you have a vision and you try to paint that vision to people that will believe in it, and you get people that will believe in it enough that they'll be the first to step up and put money in it. So that's really the early stage of technology. So as well as starting my own technology companies, I've invested in, as an angel or a Series A investor, almost about 50 now startups of the last almost 20 years. And really, most of those 50 went absolutely nowhere, but there's a couple of them that have done really well, and the success of one is enough to pay for the investment in all 50. So that's an example of how you can get involved in something early for much higher risk with a low price, and then when the time is right, you can sell out of it and then make a profit, right? And that's a simple thing of investing that you can apply to real estate, to technology companies, to the stock market, to cryptocurrency, whatever. Buy low and sell high. And so when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time learning, the basics of the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill is a brilliant one. The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clayson. These are sort of timeless books that are now coming up to being 100 years old, in the case of Think and Grow Rich. But the knowledge that's within them is still as relevant today as ever. So I set my mind to learning what would I need to do to create wealth, and then I also set myself my course on life to what do I need to do to manifest this. And part of that is a very long internal journey of identifying your subconscious. And, we've all been programmed from birth. They call it TV programming because that's what it is. We've been socially engineered to be the way the system wants us to be compliant with their objectives for us, which is, an endless war, and there's war on terror, war on drugs, wars that can't ever possibly be finished, and really result in massive profits being made by these private corporations like private prison and healthcare corporations. In my life, I probably spend more time thinking about and responding to some of the more negative elements in society these days than I do specifically on trying to manifest things. But that's because I'm about to turn 46 next week, and I've been doing this for more than 30. It's probably now 35 years of living a path of good karma, visualizing the outcome I want to do, and preparing myself to receive it, trying to shut down all of the blockages that stop those things from coming into your life and manifesting.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yep.
Yes, I do believe in all of that.
Well stated.
And in fact,
so apparently we've got some audio issues. Should we try to fix those before we go on? Sorry, I spoke a bit of a
I don't know. Well, Steve, you can hear me.
And can you guys hear me?
You on the live stream,
Jim's saying there's some microphone crackle, so maybe I can turn my mic down or something.
And why am I stuck on this thing?
I can
this is so horrifying.
No, I think... We can always ask people in the live stream. I mean, how's it going? What do you guys see?
Well, okay.
Yeah, it's real interesting. You talk about a lot of that stuff, Steve. But one of the things I did in the late 90s was I was on second wave financing for angel round companies, and I would do all the security section. Because right after a lot of security companies were big hot properties, like in 96, 97, 98, and they'd asked me to write a section on what I thought. So that was, I was in a lot of meetings on Wall Street, so I know where you're coming from. But I think it says we can hear everybody. I don't know if Linda, I don't think we can hear Linda, but.
Well, I'm not talking, but I'm going to talk now.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go, Linda.
Thanks. So I just wanted to address what you were talking about, Steve, about, the Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, Bob Proctor, The Secret. I mean, yes, that's what I write books on. In fact, we're going to get into this later too, because we both, Steve and I, have some experience with Counterculture and Timothy Leary. I was with Terrence McKenna in the rainforest. So I wrote one of the first books on manifesting with frequencies. Of course, the bottom line is they've been saying the same thing forever, right? It's pretty much what all the Illuminati and everybody's using. I keep telling everybody, there's no new science here, It's the same thing. And while I've been working on my new book, I've been studying lottery winners, and I can't tell you how many of them fully visualized it. They got up, they did everything you're supposed to do. They got up and pretended like they won. The one woman wrote out exactly $112 million and carried it around with her and told everyone she was going to win it, and that's exactly what she won. Now that's over and above coincidence. So, but I'm with you on the other part, besides just the lottery tickets. Like, your business happened because you went in it mind, body, and spirit, and you had this great, it sounds to me, heart and ability to say, I want something bigger than just myself. So at that point, it does become so much bigger than just yourself. But you win, and we all win, and thank you. That was an amazing thing that you did.
Thanks, but at the same time, I'm a real believer that you do create your own luck, and the harder you work, the luckier you get. And I worked hard for a very long time on projects that really ultimately failed. And that's part of life in Silicon Valley, that other cultures around the world are maybe not so accepting of failure, but in Silicon Valley, it's almost, one of their sayings is if you haven't failed, then companies don't want to invest in you because you haven't learned anything yet. But it's not technically true of how it works, and they definitely don't want to invest in people that only have failures. But in terms of developing yourself as a person, you learn so much from those failures, and it's how you choose to respond rather than react to them. And you can let them get you down, and it can send you in a depression, and everything becomes like a spiral, and you start you're not eating nutritious food, so that makes things worse, and it makes you feel more sad. And I've seen many people go through that, as well as having gone through that myself, but I've always tried to balance things around a positive forward outlook, and it's the generation of energy. So we come to this earth as energy, and for the whole time that we're here, we're generating energy outwards, and it's up to us to choose the frequencies that we vibrate on. And I haven't chosen only light and happiness and love, but I could easily do that, if I wanted a path of yoga, meditation, the temples, things like that. But to me, there's a lot of things wrong with the world, and I think all of us now, with this amazing technology, the internet, are in a position to address it, just with the power of our ideas. And it's so important, I think, for us to speak out while we still do have some freedom of speech. I mean, it's obvious that they're cracking down on it, and their strategy has always been this, gradual, piece by piece, step by step. They move the goalposts so slowly that people don't really notice it, but the pressure is relentless, and you can see the direction that this is going in. So, I've sort of, if you could relate this to Buddhism and the path to enlightenment, that they have these bodhisattvas who have achieved the techniques and ability to move towards enlightenment, but they choose instead to keep manifesting in samsara, the world of suffering, for lifetimes, because they want to bring their teachings and their energy to others. And I think as well as that, there's this concept of noblesse oblige, which is if you're a member of the noble class, you're a knight or a king or a prince, you have an obligation to look after those less fortunate than yourself, rather than just sit in the castle all day, with wine and feasts.
Well, I wish more people thought like you did, sincerely, because it's just not what's going on. We've got 400.
Well, I think there's a lot of us out there, but our voices get drowned out by the system and the AIs, and they being the man in capital letters. They don't want this sort of knowledge out there, and so at the core of the secret societies, they're learning all of this Kabbalistic magic. They're learning every technique of spellcasting and mind control and manifesting energy and manipulating will and destiny that people have learned for thousands and thousands of years in human civilization. But then out for the mass public, they're using tools like Disney, which I see as absolutely something weaponized. They're using that to broadcast a message of the occult. That's this fairyland, Mickey Mouse, princess programming and everything like that. Like, yeah, there's fairies, yeah, there's all of this. So they can imprint enough of what's required in their magic in that for people to be susceptible to it and programmable, but they're not actually teaching the core teachings of both spirituality and also, this process of manifestation, whether you want to call it magic, spell casting, or the secret, or whatever it is, this sort of thing that you can test this for yourself. You can live your life by it and start doing it and see what happens. And everyone I've heard of who ever tested it immediately saw positive results from it. So it's hard to argue with that. And not to change the topic, but something that just occurs to me as we talk about the secret wasn't Quinn Michaels very heavily tied up with all this stuff, with being up in Mount Shasta with Dave used to be up there as well.
I've been up there. In fact, I should throw in a little movie of me there. I actually have the ability to do that now with my fancy stuff. I was really surprised being up. I hear a lot about places that are supposedly high frequency places, and I've gone there and I feel some. But I was so surprised at the energy in Shasta and how beautiful it truly was. And I just want to say,
it's gorgeous up there, very nice.
It really is, and it's a really super magical energy. But to what you were saying, the manifesting and the frequencies, it's quantum physics. It is the basic science of our sixth sense. So too many people. And I think this was a bunch of propaganda also, and maybe you can talk to this. But when I was starting to teach the law of attraction or frequency attunement, as I call it, a lot of people would come in and say, this is new agey or this is of the devil or something like this. And I'm like, well, actually, no, empowering yourself and then helping to empower the world isn't that what Jesus would have done? Not that I'm a Bible person, but the bottom line is it's quantum physics. That's what the Masons were using, the Rosicrucians are using, the Illuminati, only they're actually using it together, like powerful prayer. And the more people, which is good for us, because once we join together, we, instead of pretending it's not there, right? It's happening. The united frequency force. And I'm just sorry, to answer your question, Captain Sensible, the best thing you can do to stay in a high frequency is to get out in nature. That will lift you up automatically if you're really low, and good friends and dancing. But a lot of times you don't want to do that when you're in a low place. You got to grow slowly out of it. But it's like a discipline, right? And to what you were saying too, if you want to be successful, I truly believe it's a mind, body, spirit thing. It's a 3-dimensional incorporating all of you. So say you want this dream of being a multimillionaire. Well, then you should be on YouTube researching businesses that you might be able to do and then actually working toward that, making the phone calls, right? I mean, that's what you did, right?
Well, if you don't mind indulging me in telling the story, I'll go as briefly as I can. But the key moments for me were, I remember coming home from school one day, and we were in England because my dad was in the New Zealand Air Force, and he was posted to RAF base in Harrogate. So we lived in it. Well, it was off-base housing, and it wasn't a very nice part of town. Like we used to, my sister and I, walk home from school past a pub where there'd been a murder. So that was kind of scary for us coming from New Zealand because we've never heard of things like murders here, really. But anyway, I came home one day and there was a really, really nice car. Like, it was outside of its place for the neighbourhood for there to be such a brand new flash sports car in this neighbourhood. And I came home and I was so excited to see it. And I asked my dad, Dad, why can't we have a car like that? And he said, well, son, that's because we're not rich. And so I'm like, oh, right, well, that's what I want to do when I grow up. I want to be rich. I made that decision at 8 years old. And then from that being my dream, I mean, people used to laugh at me. Well, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I want to be rich. And they used to laugh and ridicule me. And I got teased and bullied at school. And I think a lot of kids go through that type of stuff. And it's made me stronger as a person, being able to, all the people that have ever doubted me or laughed at me, that became fuel that drove me forward to achieve things and determined to make my dreams come true. But, all of that happened for me actually at a pretty young age, Linda. I started my sausage software company where the website sausage.com in 1995, and I took it public in 1996. And I was 23 years old. I was the CEO of a publicly listed company on the stock exchange. I took a record that Rupert Murdoch had held since 1956 or something, to be the youngest person who's the head of a public company in Australia. And I actually don't have that record anymore. A kid who was 19 recently floated his company on the stock exchange. But anyway, I've done that a couple of times where I've had an idea and I've built up a company. And then I took it public on a stock exchange and was able to make quite a bit of money from doing that. And the first time, from having the idea to it was out on the internet and selling, and I had, money that I desperately needed to pay my rent and live off coming in, that took about 8 weeks. And then the second time, it took 14 years. And the second time I knew a hell of a lot more than the first time, and I had a proven track record, and I had money. I had the best lawyers and advisors and consultants in the world. I had an idea that massive companies were putting massive amounts of money in, a great technology platform, patents even, and it still took 14 years from having the idea to getting to the IPO. And a lot of times along the way, in both of those time cycles, and to be fair, for the IPO for the first one, 16 months, but still, it's a big difference. But it's kind of the same journey where you have it up, you have it down, you have a low, you have a series of lows. The lows seem to be getting worse. You get in a rut and you wonder how can you lift yourself back out of it. And the answer is, I completely agree with you, Linda. Getting out into nature is so important, and for me, that's always worked. You take a long hike along the beach or through the woods, try to find like a waterfall, rainforest if you can get it. And it's amazing what that does for the soul, particularly if you start doing it frequently on a regular basis. And then also, what you're putting into your body has a huge effect. So you just have to become aware of, are you eating nutritious food? Are you eating chemicals? Are you in an environment that causes toxicity, like living underneath electrical power lines? Or, you mentioned energy vortexes. Maybe there's like a ghost or something like that that's sort of known to be in that area. Consider all types of things that you're doing, and then start changing them and see if you notice a difference. And then from doing that, you can tune in, I think, to find yourself. But it really starts with the context and the environment that you're in. And also the people that you surround yourself with. Sometimes you need to cut people off from your life so that you're able to move forward and to meet new people.
Ooh, yeah, isn't that a tricky subject? But that is for sure. So, God, I could talk with you about this on and on, but we've got some people that want to talk some news. I've got a question here for you. What do you think about the drones in Chernobyl? Talk about going from high frequency to the drones.
Yeah, well, I think that's very interesting. What that's referring to is a couple of stories on burners.me called "Insane in the Ukraine." Jago like you've never seen him before. And this has caused quite a stir, and Jason Goodman is welcome to come to that story and post in the comments any statement that's in it that he believes to be untrue, and any evidence that he has to, show that it's untrue. But basically what happened is there's this company called Aerocine, and they were flying on 6-rotor micro-hexacopter drones, high-definition red cameras over all kinds of sites around the world, but they weren't allowed to actually operate these things domestically due to FAA regulations. And they had to actually petition the FAA, this company, to get approval to operate the drones. And Error City was featured in Stars and Stripes, which is a military publication. We've got all kinds of evidence that what this company was up to, including the FAA applications and various legal filings. And the trademark is owned by Jason Goodman, and Jason Goodman was the CEO of this company. And we have him on stage 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks after the Maidan massacre in Kiev in the Ukraine occurred, making a presentation as the CEO of Erosini, this drone company, and about this footage that went viral of HD footage of Chernobyl. So they must have got permission from the government of Ukraine to be in Chernobyl, flying with the most high definition commercial drone in the world, arguably using military grade technology. They had permission from the government to do that, and they're in this country, Erosini's team with this drone, flying it and filming this footage days before this revolution broke out in the Ukraine. And it's really quite remarkable timing. And Jason Goodman has never addressed these claims directly. He said, well, I wasn't the CEO of the company at the time the drone flight over Chernobyl occurred, therefore I had nothing to do with it. But, 2 weeks after that, he's on stage in London at a conference giving a presentation about this. So, I mean, how did it all happen so quickly? At the very least, crediting that everything he said about that was a true statement, he's seen this drone flight over Chernobyl and said, oh, hey, I've got to get involved with this. But, we have video of Goodman on, I believe, the week before the Maidan massacre, in the United States, flying one of these drones with a camera, showing it to a couple of guys in trench coats who looked like they were, Russian spies, but actually turns out that they are most probably from the company that makes the camera. So, I've presented all kinds of evidence, as I do with everything that I put on my blog. I don't say things that aren't true, and I'm a researcher, so, with every, I like to have primary source documentation and as much of it as I possibly can to support it. And if you go through these posts at burners.me, you'll see that the bits that are underlined are part of the citations for further evidence saying this. So I don't know if you'd like to add any further comments to that, maybe.
Well, I don't have any opinion on that. I personally try and stay out of YouTube fights because I think they're usually... I think that they're controlled opposition, and I'm just not going to give my time to it. Obviously, you're a brilliant person who has so much to add, right? Who wants to spend time on some buffoon in New York that a bunch of people listen to, because they're bored in the afternoon? It's like, people are there's always going to be that certain amount of people that want to dwell on the negative and the horrible. Of course, we got to look at what's going on with the news, but that said, I don't listen, but aren't you repping, didn't you want to talk about give somebody some credit? Is that...
I just want to mention, if you can see my t-shirt here, Lift the Veil, truthclothing.io. They're fantastic t-shirts, really high quality. I love wearing them. They fit great. They have big and tall sizes as well. And, by buying those t-shirts, you're really supporting someone that I think is really trying very hard on YouTube to bring a neutral perspective and true fact-based reporting.
And his name is what? Lift the Veil, right? I'll put that in there if you guys want to go.
Lift the Veil.
If you want to go subscribe to him and
the clothing site, truthclothing.io. When you buy a t-shirt, you're supporting, YouTube, independent alt media. It's a system of being, financially independent without your monetization being controlled by YouTube. And that's an unfortunate thing that's going on, that you sort of have to get monetized on YouTube to be promoted by their algorithms. But then if you start talking about stuff that they don't like, suddenly, everything can be demonetized kind of on a whim and with no recourse. And so we see a lot of people walking on eggshells in the truth community, and that should be the one place in the world. I mean, the people really need to be able to go and talk about what's true and what's false. And I actually think that fake news is the biggest problem in the world, and I think that the answer to it is truth. And I think that we, the people, if we could just learn and teach others around us how to discern what's true, what's fake news, and what's propaganda being created either by a corporation or a government, intelligence agency or a secret society, trying to be pushed towards us for actually nefarious purposes of social engineering. So that's the black magic spells are the propaganda, and the white magic spells are the truth and the evidence and the logic. And there's a lot to be said for studying the trivium, which is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. If you have the grammar right, you're very clear and precise about what you're talking about, and you can back all of that up with evidence. And if you have the rhetoric right, you can explain it to people. Mm-hmm. And if you have the logic right, you can analyze things critically. Like, is it logical that this statement would be true? Or is there another scenario that's more logical, such as someone's being paid to say that to me, to trick me, but they don't really believe that?
Oh,
so I think that's a world we live in, where it is a world of deceit. There's huge amounts of deceit, and the state itself is in the biggest culprit in creating deceit, which is exactly what George Orwell wrote about.
Right. Oh my gosh. I know. I look at this, and another person that talked about this, to your point, was Naomi Wolf. She wrote that book, The End of America, I think it was, and she talked about what needed to be in place for a free system or a free country to be shut down. And one of those things, of course, was shutting up reporters. So I just wanted to ask you about this because, let me see if I can put this on me a second. So, that's horrifying. Go back to you. Okay, I worked for Alex Jones for a brief time, and, definitely his style of news is not for everyone. That said, I found it incredibly disturbing when they pulled him off of everything and cut him off of his YouTube, his Twitter, everything. And they shut him up, and they used him as an example. And now everybody that talks about, like George Webb, he had his live stream pulled. People are just having their live streams pulled all over the place or demonetized. Every time I do a video that has anything with news in it, they send me a little note and say, we can't monetize this. It might not be proper. And I go back and say, well, check again. And then they look at it and they're like, okay, it is proper. But it's just the shutting down of the voices that we have to be concerned about, because after a while, who's going to want to step up if everyone's becoming a target, like in 1984, to your point?
Yeah, that was definitely, but even worse than that is, a lot of people have been stepping up, and doing research and sharing it with others, and that's really what we need, and that's what people are truly interested in. But that's what's getting shut down. And Alex Jones, I started following him when he was covering the riots against the G20, which I guess back then was the G7 or G8 in Seattle, which I think was around about 1997. And he's an amazing example of how you can come from the alt media and build up, something that's actually sustainable, financially successful, and with political power and influence. And that went all the way up to the election, where there's no question that Alex Jones played a massive, massive role in getting Trump elected. And I think, he deserves incredible credit for that. But there is this nexus of Zionism that obviously to become president, you can either be the ally or the enemy of the Zionists. And if you want to become president and you're the enemy of the Zionists, they're going to take you out like Kennedy. So it's never, ever going to happen. So the only way that you can become president is to be the ally of the Zionists. And so Trump, in recognizing that geopolitical reality of the world, has said, okay, I'm going to completely go to bed with these guys and support their agenda, and they'll support my agenda, and, let's do it. So that's the one bad thing, in my opinion, about supporting President Trump, which I do, but also supporting Alex Jones and InfoWars, is all of this overlap with the Zionism. And we know that, Unit 8200, the Talpiot project is Israel is becoming the technology and defense center of the universe and wants to infiltrate and have the keys to all of the other systems around the world. And this is an extremely big story in cybersecurity. And if Dave's still on the call, it will be good to hear some of his thoughts about what's actually happening in real cybersecurity issues. But the penetration of all of the internet by certain nation states that are, closely intertwined with businesses and then millions and millions of people around the world who act on behalf of those nation states, is a thing of grave security concern. And to me, where is this coming from, the deplatforming and the shutting messages down, has been coming from those nation states. And so the specific example then of why does Alex Jones get taken off YouTube when YouTube is, I think certainly an Israeli operation, and why did they then do it against Alex Jones if he's an Israeli operation? And the nuance in that I find interesting, and I think everybody needs to see it, is Steve Pachenik. He made a video right before the election, and he showed his face, and he hadn't shown his face. He'd been on Alex Jones since 9/11, never shown his face. And he came on and said, this is it. I'm basically coming out because I'm the spokesperson. I've been selected as the spokesperson for a group, of white hats in the military intelligence community who saw that, foreign powers had initiated a coup in the United States, represented by the Clinton Global Initiative and all of their ties to Saudi Arabia, Ukraine, and so on. And so we initiated a counter coup. And we selected Donald Trump to be, the head of our organisation to take over the Republican Party and become president through legitimate means to take America back. And I believe that was an absolutely true statement, and I believe that that's the big picture of what's going on. And anyone looking at QAnon, you have to see Q in the context of that if you assume that statement that Pachenik made is true, and then all the other interactions between Pachenik and Alex Jones over the years, and that Alex Jones is also part of this same group of white hats, that are deeply within the military and intelligence, operating for the good of America, Patriots, John Birch Society, whatever it is, Council of National Policy. These groups are basically at war with each other. That's how I see it, that there's a factional war within the intelligence community and even within Israel. And Netanyahu and the Likud party, they're very, very close to Kushner, which everyone assumes means that Trump, they're very, very close to Trump as well. And I'm not sure, but I don't see Trump as necessarily a puppet of Israel, but I do see the political system as a puppet of the banksters, who most of them actually don't live in Israel. Most of them are sort of around Switzerland, Germany. The Templars of Octagon.
The banks for sure. I mean, let's face it. I mean, this is why I kind of crack up when people even talk about, the darn Dems or the darn Republicans, because it's like, there is no party representing the people anymore. You've got one party representing big oil and big banks. You've got the other one representing big agriculture and big pharma, and nobody gives a darn about us. And people need to realize that it's all a big joke to keep us just like, my dad was a magician, so, he did literal Houdini tricks, underwater with stuff, and whole deal. We had rabbits and doves all over our house, the whole deal. And it's like, I know all about illusion. I know all about, hey, look over here while we're doing all of this, It's like, this big fanfare about the wall. Well, what's going on over here, And enough of that. I did have a couple questions. One, people want to know and talk about Timothy Leary, but then somebody wanted to know about Leonard Pickard. I don't know who he is. Can you answer to that?
Yeah, well, it's a very fascinating story, and I guess it sort of ties together, right? So Timothy Leary was basically the spiritual head of the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. I don't think he was necessarily the operational head, but he was held up to be the leader of this group that was operating out of Laguna Beach and bringing in hash from Afghanistan, and they were involved in the manufacture of LSD. There were these two LSD chemists, Nick Sand and Tim Scully, who were able to make LSD. There was a guy called Bear Owsley from the Grateful Dead, who's very famous for making a lot of the LSD of the 60s. And then before that was Albert Hoffman.
Yes, I was in the rainforest with Albert Hoffman.
Justin in the chat wants to let me know the other one I'm forgetting. But there'd basically been 6 people in the world who had been able to manufacture LSD in massive quantities. And this guy, William Leonard Picard, was one of them. And, he walked into the DEA office in 1972, and when the DEA had first been set up, and said, I want a license. And he got one. And there's another guy called Alexander Shulgin, and maybe he was in that list, but he's a fascinating character. And
I was in the rainforest with Alexander Shulgin.
You know him?
I was in the rainforest with him, Alexander Shulgin, Hoffman, Terence McKenna. Yeah, I was there for quite a while with them doing research, so I got to meet them. Sorry, just wanted to say that. I don't care about all the celebrities I've met, but I was fascinated with the scientists that I met. So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, and these people are extremely intelligent, and, these substances that were introduced to society and presented as the cool thing that rock stars do, or these days the cool thing that burners do. Mm-hmm. If you want to be in Silicon Valley, you have to go to Burning Man and do these hallucinogenic drugs, and you have to go to the rainforest and do these ayahuasca ceremonies. Mm-hmm. And it's not that there's anything necessarily bad within the use of the substance. It's more than that the entire context around that substance has kind of been made into a counterculture. And, at the core of that word counterculture is the word cult. And so there's this huge record of cults being created. As part of, the MK Ultra program had 149 sub-projects. And Stanford University, a couple of students from Stanford who are ex-military people, inspired by Aldous Huxley, went and set up the Esalen Institute. And the Esalen Institute in Big Sur, beautiful place, but that's to me is DARPA and the Tavistock Institute's occult base in the United States, and all of their other occult projects are managed out of there. That's like the spiritual HQ for the Tavistock Social Engineering Project, which you can trace that back to the Opium Wars of the British East India Company. They basically used opium, which they discovered the substance, and they turned to manufacturing it on a mass scale on slave plantations, and they enslaved the Indian population to be the farmers working on it, and they enslaved the Chinese population, one, to be consumers of the opium, but two, to be unproductive members of society, so that their country wouldn't really get ahead, and then these robber barons could come in and buy up everything on the cheap. And China is very heavily owned by the wealthy global interests from the West at the end of the late 19th century, if you have a look into it, including the Rockefellers in particular were hugely influential there. But the opium wars, 2 opium wars in China were used to enslave and socially engineer the population, make it easier to control and easier for the banksters to take everything over. So in the 1960s, this thing called the British invasion came, and it was Opium War 3. Well, arguably you could argue that the US Civil War, one of the amazing benefits of it was it created a massive amount of opium addicts and demand for this new synthesized form of opium heroin. That market was set for that to be released. But anyway, this opium war in the British invasion started with the Beatles. And the Beatles going on the Ed Sullivan show, they landed in the US and there were these screaming girls to meet them at the airport. That was all staged. That was all just completely staged PR propaganda. And the Beatles came out of the EMI, Thorn EMI group, which is a massive defence contractor. And all kinds of ties to this Tavistock Institute with the Beatles. I mean, they played at the Cavern Club in Liverpool when they first got started, which used to be a Knights Templar gathering place in a cave underground, for a huge amount of Liverpool's history. And Liverpool's one of the most occult cities in the world. Shout out to Darren Williams, who recently gave me a great personal tour of that. But coming out of this occult base of Liverpool, heavily Order of the Rosy Cross kind of stuff, here these Beatles are launched, and they're sort of building on the philosophies of the Beats, the Beat generation, which is, Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac and all this kind of stuff that was really, glorifying drug use in literature targeted at college students and then that was taken on and became another generation targeted at teenagers in a weaponized fashion with the Beatles and launched through propaganda. And then it's sort of, you could see the Disney formula, say with Miley Cyrus, who for much of her career she's launched as Hannah Montana. It was this nice, sweet, innocent, wholesome girl. Go buy the lunchbox and all of the products available at Target and Walmart and Kmart, licensed merchandise, and these girls are growing up buying into that myth. And then the Miley character gets switched on. Miley Cyrus comes out, and she's the whore of Babylon, and she's encouraging all of these girls at a certain age to go out suddenly and become promiscuous.
And that pizza, she was wearing all those pizza clothes all over the place during the, Pizzagate. I mean, she's just totally promoting that. I mean, if that Pizzagate, I thought it was true. I'm definitely, there's a lot of, what always surprised me about the LSD, and, because Terence McKenna was always into the mushrooms, right? Because the mushrooms, all the Mayan gods were sitting on mushrooms, and the mushrooms actually have a spiritual, consciousness lifting effect. Whereas, and he wrote Food of the Gods because he said eating the mushroom throughout the years evolved the hunters and survival of the fittest and all of that. But the LSD, I'm going to go there with you. It's there's no spirit in it. It does ruin your brain if you do it over and over again. I mean, I worked in high-end rehabs. We didn't have acid people in there, but we all know about the people that were are ruined forever and have acid flashbacks and things like that. And right at that same time, mushrooms have always been available, never hurt anybody. In fact, they're using them now for all sorts of things, depression, Alzheimer's, and things like that. So I'm going to go with you. That is kind of a weird thing with the LSD. I never understood. I'm like, why aren't people just doing the mushrooms? Just from a holistic, way of looking at it. You have this plant, or you have this chemical. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think a fantastic video to watch is on YouTube is called A Conversation on LSD, and it's basically the MK Ultra reunion, filmed in 1978. And it's got Timothy Leary, it's got, all of the MK Ultra doctors. I think McKenna's in it. And they're basically discussing this operation. And one of the things they said is that the religious side of it, that never came out until they went west of the Mississippi. And so that was basically a Hollywood thing that Leary had devised in the Millbrook mansion, that he was going to be in Playboy with all of these models, and then he was going to promote this as this kind of spiritual thing tied to the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But I encourage anybody that's into the psychedelics to follow Jan Irvin's work if you haven't heard about it already. And I sent him a book about the Florentine Codex that was used as the source for a lot of this ideas that, this was ancient shamanic tradition of healing brought in by Marina Sabina. And in fact, that was just a fake story that, when the Aztecs used mushrooms in their ceremonies, it was to bring on bloodlust, when the streets are running from rivers of blood with the child sacrifices and everything. So it goes back to this cannibal.
I've got a different opinion on the Mayans after studying them for a long time. It's kind of cosmic, but I really believe that, have you ever been to the Mayan ruins? Steve, you ever been there?
Yeah, and just to clarify, I did say Aztecs, so I don't have any issues against the Mayans, but they sort of was, I guess, very very similar cultures in some of the practices that took hold of those societies. But yeah, I've been to the pyramids at Tenochtitlan. Tenochtitlan. I can't say my Spanish too good.
I was in.
That was amazing. Really, really interesting place. And you see that there are these pyramids all over the world, right? And so there was a culture around the world building pyramids. And then where was these cannibals, and the child sacrifice? And that was all over the world as well. Even in New Zealand, we had the Maori people that came here before, probably 250 years before the white man came here. Many of those tribes were cannibals, and they would eat the brains of their opponents on the battlefield. So even in New Zealand, we can't get away from this, and you can't say that, that's all the synagogue of Satan, this Luciferian pedo cult, necessarily, when these are tribes of people 500 years old doing it within their culture. It seems like that stuff, that's why Pizzagate is real, because this stuff goes back thousands of years all over the world. It's just part of human history.
Right. I just, it's weird. It's like, when I was in the Mayan ruins, and I was like, you can't touch them anymore. But back when I was there, I won a scholarship with Terence McKenna and Alex Shulgin. All these scientists went down there. And it's the only other mummy in the world, other than Egypt, is in Palenque in the Mayan ruins there. And, you know, you could crawl up the ruins at the time. And I remember sitting on the top of the ruins, okay? And I remember looking down at people, and I was watching them, and right at the bottom of the pyramid is the block where they used to do sacrifices. So they've got this, like, you know, like stone thing. Well, I started watching people try and get up this pyramid. They had no business trying to get up a 10-story pyramid straight up. Like they looked like they hadn't even walked across to get their own food out of a refrigerator. Like, no business doing something dangerous. And I started to think, if these were cosmic astronauts that put these pyramids here, per se, and then they left, did the people... did they make a mistake when they saw people dying going up the pyramid, you know, falling off or whatnot? Because I watched a lot of people almost fall off. Like, did they assume that the pyramid was wanting bloodlust? Was this just?
Yeah, I get what you mean. The pyramid is very steep, and you think that it's maybe not for people that are completely off their faces to go up it. But consider the other possibility that. The idea was that the priests are throwing them down these pyramids, you know, to kill them and throwing them off. And I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't want to single out, you know, those cultures, but I think you make a good point about the ancient aliens. And so you look at the mushroom as the most ancient hallucinogen, you know, possibly the soma that right. You know that was written about in the Vedas, and how did that suddenly come on this planet? Like, either God made it or aliens put it there, but I just find it hard to believe that these substances that can let you tap into these other dimensions, say like DMT or ayahuasca, where you know, a common experience is seeing these like little grey alien creatures that are potentially coming through from another dimension. And Terence McKenna talked about these self-transforming machine elves. Michael Aquino, who's been enormously influential with these concepts of mind war, that you know basically included embedded journalists in the military on CNN and Fox News. I mean, he basically wrote the business plan for CNN with that mind war paper. And a lot of what we see today going on YouTube and Twitter and meme warfare, everything like that, you know, is bombarding us with propaganda in this mind war. And, you know, Alex Jones, to his credit, came out very early on and said, I'm part of the info war, but, you know, mind war was a project of the US military, and so info war being a project of the US military, I mean, that's not a big stretch for me. I see that going on, and now that the targets of this type of stuff is we the people, and so doing these shamanic substances and hallucinogens and everything like that, it's making you more susceptible to the mind war. You know, that's the design of it. That's why the government would be synthesizing all of these different compounds. And you can see in that video I mentioned, or if you go to my Vimeo channel, I think it's called Crypto Beast on Vimeo, as well. I've got clips from this there, and there's a guy called Captain Al Hubbard, Captain Trips, who was working for the Stanford Research Institute as a special advisor to Willis Harman, the founder. And he was bringing massive quantities of drugs between Canada and the US. And, you know, he said that the CIA had isolated ayahuasca, LSD, magic mushrooms, and about 12 other substances, and worked out how to chemically produce those substances and their effects. And so one of those other substances would be scopolamine, which is this zombie drug. They breathe this powder in your face in voodoo rituals, and the person just goes under a spell and will do anything they're told to do. They're completely docile and suggestible, and then they wake up with no memory of it. And so that's how you create these,
I thought that was alcohol.
Not the Parkland killer or whatever, but the kid that turns up being the patsy found with the gun in his trunk and doesn't know what's going on with his eyes all crazy, that, you know, that they get him with this ancient voodoo substance.
I've never heard of that. What's it called again?
Scopolamine.
Scopolamine. Interesting.
But I realised that I got a bit off topic answering the question about William Leonard Picard, and him being one of the 6 people that could manufacture the LSD. So, he's doing 2 lifetime sentences in prison, and he wrote a book. It was, they call it a Roman Clef, where it's a novel but based on his own experiences. And Alexander Shulgin also did the same thing, where they just basically change a couple of names to protect the people and then tell you the true story of what went on. And so both Shulgin and Picard went into the DEA as soon as the DEA was formed and got licenses. And Shulgin, not only was he licensed, but he, was a Bohemian Grove member as well, and he was plugged into, the highest levels of corporations, politics, and the military through Bohemian Grove and through his musical talents.
Wow. Well, I'll just finish with, I will say that the Mayan gods are all sitting on mushrooms. So I always thought that maybe they brought them because they're definitely higher consciousness. But DMT is definitely not a drug. It is a near-death experience. And I wouldn't, it's totally otherworldly. But I think you're right about the LSD. I can see it scrambling the brain. I can see them trying to do something like that. I mean, control the people. I mean, so let's talk about 1984 because it is happening, right? We're seeing this Big Brother stuff. Look. Please tell me what you think about that Chinese social system that they're putting in. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Right, well, I mean, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and even worse is that they put it in Black Mirror on Netflix.
I know.
Netflix is a massive social engineering tool, and so we're all familiar with the idea because we saw Black Mirror, so right. You can see that we're being 100% set up for something like that to happen.
Well, so then let me ask you, instead of just pontificating about this, how do we stop it from happening in the U.S. or in New Zealand? How do we stop it from happening like it's happening in China? Because London's already rolled out the mass surveillance everywhere, right? I mean, so they could switch over and do something like that in a minute. They're all prepared, but...
Yeah, well, I don't know how we stop it from happening, but I think the tools that we have are art. Art has definitely always been a way of looking at what's really going on in society and informing the people, and education. And if you look into the work of Charlotte Iserby on the dumbing down of America, I mean, she was like the secretary or undersecretary of education under Reagan, someone who knew a great deal about what was going on in the education system, and she spilled the beans on it and said that they have had a multi-generational plan to make people stupider and stupider. And you can actually see the US position in world test rankings and academic scores slipping down over the years. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, it was in the 70s, it was, number 1 or number 2 everywhere. And now I'm not sure if it's even in the top 10. And New Zealand has an excellent education system. We kind of are a socialist country that works. Healthcare is free. We don't have lawsuits. If you have an accident here, the government gives you money, but you can't sue anyone. I mean, we have lawsuits for other things, but we don't have the ambulance chaser lawsuits. And, if you get sick here, you go to the hospital and that's free. The government pays. But, you might have a very long waiting list to even see a specialist. Like, if you need a hip replacement, this happened to my parents a few years ago. It's wait for 2 years, to see the specialist. But if you can afford to pay for private healthcare, then you can go see the specialist tomorrow. And so it's sort of this hybrid capitalist and socialist system here, and they value education because as a small country, New Zealand wants to be able to compete on the world stage. And, we have some of the best technology in the world has come out of here. Sailing country's very big at sailing, movies, a lot of, not just Lord of the Rings people know about, but actually James Cameron has lived in New Zealand for about a decade now making Avatar 2 and 3. And those movies, the post-production, everything is being done by Weta Digital, which is in Wellington, my hometown, and that's Peter Jackson, who made Lord of the Rings, also has this unbelievable ability to do, the computer graphics animation, creating it and number crunching and processing it required for these massive immersive IMAX 3D movies. And, over time, that's where the entertainment industry is going, is Hollywood is going to just get more and more spectacular. But the essence of it doesn't change. It's still really about spells and bewitching people.
Yes, it is. It certainly is. James Cameron is about to come out with a brand new cannabis company too, just off color on that, but like called Mizu, and it's going to revolutionize the vaping industry. So look for that. I was going to ask you what to invest in, but hey, I just want to ask you, because so many times like this conversation comes up in America about healthcare. I mean, Bernie Sanders is like, why can't we all have like a minimum bare healthcare, like what you're talking about? You can still purchase a better one if you want to. And everyone says, well, where's the money going to come from? So what kind of taxes are you looking at to pay for these social, like no lawyers, but you still get the money if you're hurt? And what's the tax rate? Is it 50% or something? Or what's...
No, I mean the tax rate is roughly the same as the US when you consider state and federal taxes. And we have a thing here, the GST, goods and services tax, which is like VAT in Canada. So on top of every purchase, there's 15% or whatever it is of extra tax that you pay for it all. And then things are pretty expensive here, like the housing is quite expensive, cars, and we don't have Walmart with all of that cheap stuff coming from China. So the standard of living is quite high, but the taxes don't have to be higher because there's just so much waste in the US system. And we hear stories over here, say someone from Australia or New Zealand goes to America and they have a baby while they're in America, and they go to the hospital to have the baby, and they didn't have any health insurance, so they get the bill, and it's $1.1 million.
Yeah.
And it just blows our minds that it could be $1 million to go to a hospital and have a baby. And if you go to most hospitals around the world and see what the price is for that, it's nothing like that. It's probably not even $10,000, right? So that just shows such an incredible disparity where who's getting rich? Well, big pharma and the banksters, the usual culprits at the core of the system are profiting enormously and it's a system that's not designed to make people well. It's designed for everybody to stay sick and even get sicker, so they become dependent on the drugs, and then, the drugs start interacting with each other in bad ways, and then they die, but they don't know whose fault it is, Well, it's horrible. So here with the government being involved in the cost of healthcare, they do have more of an incentive for people to actually get well so that they're less of a load on the system. And it's definitely one good thing about New Zealand is a lot of things like that actually work. But, if you want to look at it as the testing ground for the New World Order, you can certainly see that going on here as well. Like we had political correctness long before America, and I thought it would never come into Australia, but it did. It took over Australia. I thought it would never, ever come into America. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor of California, but it came in with Obama. The progressives took over and brought in political correctness and just about destroyed the Constitution and the Republic and the values of America from 1776 in just 8 years with this thing that, had been weaponized and finally honed, being tried out in countries like New Zealand. And so now we have the cashless society around here. It's just incredibly easy. If I send a payment to somebody's bank account, they receive it within an hour, and in most cases they receive that in 10, 15 minutes. And if I transfer money between my own accounts, it's instant and it's free. And there's everybody has PayWave, so I can wave either my phone or my Apple Watch or my credit card at the terminal. Beep, 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 everything's paid. I don't have to sign anything or press any keys or anything, just from proximity. And it's the cashless society is something that's been talked about for a long time by the New World Order, and it's kind of dangerous, and cryptocurrency as well is kind of, I can see how the entire field of cryptocurrency is a step towards electronic payments and the mark of the beast and the New World Order. At the same time, the internet came out of the Pentagon, and I'm not going to stop using the internet. So just because it, has been designed and given to us perhaps with intentions that aren't 100% the best for us, that doesn't mean there's nothing good in there or that we can't use these technologies to our own advantage.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I think that, capitalism has run amok in America so that we don't, like you said, it's so expensive. So then you have the pharmaceutical companies working off the backs of the insurance companies, and I know, even just talking to my doctors, they feel they can't do anything, because anytime they actually try and help anybody, then they're out of like their practice, and then they can get sued. And so they just keep shoveling out the same stuff they're allowed to give, which are these pharmaceuticals. And I worked in high-end rehabs. Everyone's like it's so funny. I'll hear people say, well, I've got to keep my kid away from the marijuana. I'm like, well, keep them away from your medicine cabinet. That's where the problem is. With these opioids that they just keep dumping, and if they just approved an even stronger one, when it's like everything in cannabis can do, is they can use that won't hurt you, that won't be bad for your body, won't be addictive. And so I think in that way, capitalism, I don't know if that's what an oligarchy is at that point, a capitalism run rampant. But I do have to say one thing, and tell me what you think about this, just to talk about the wall, because there was a big, I don't know if you happen to see, Trump was on TV today, calling a state of emergency to push the wall program. And I was at I'm an author, so I was at this book club as the guest host, and they were talking about the wall, and they said, why don't they just go fully capitalism with it? Let Nike sponsor a mile of the wall, and then Coke can sponsor the wall, Taco Bell on the other side, whatever. Like, why don't we let capitalism pay for the wall with promos? And I'm like, that's actually kind of brilliant. I mean, that's what we do, right? So, well, that said, I was also at the rally, Trump's rally in Buffalo, when he was talking about the wall. And I went to all the rallies. I went to the Clinton rally, I went to the Bernie rally, I went to the Trump rally. Okay, I went to see them all. And he was talking about the wall while people were being dragged out of the hall. And he said, and I'm going to put Trump on the wall. And I just turned and I'm like, he didn't just say he was going to put Trump on the wall. Because I'd be fine with that if he pays for it. Why does he pay for the darn wall? He's got the money. I mean, J.P. Morgan bailed us out of the Depression himself with a check. And he wasn't even our president. So, Trump, you have all this money. Build the darn wall. Put your name on it. And Trump's wall. What about...
Yeah, well, look, to share some perspective from New Zealand on that, we have pretty much the strictest immigration in the world here. It's extremely difficult to get into New Zealand to live. If you want to come and visit, you're welcome. Very easy. Americans don't need a visa, or they get an electronic one on the flight. It's like you can come for 90 days, and it only probably takes 2 to 3 weeks to see all of New Zealand. It's a small country. It's about the size of California with 4.5 million people. And it's a multicultural society. I mean, we're sort of the United Nations of the Pacific Islands. So here in Auckland, where I live, we have, as well as the Maori people, we have Samoans, Tongans, Niueans, Fijians, Vanuatuans, people from all over the Pacific Islands. And some of these nationalities and tribes have, feuds and beefs between each other that go back before New Zealand was even founded. And yet we all managed to live together here in pretty relative harmony. But one thing we don't have is massive amounts of immigrants from all of these wars being fought all around the world. And then I lived in Australia for a very long time, for 23 years, and Australia does have this issue of masses of immigrants. For example, when we split Sudan up into 2 countries, and South Sudan, where all the oil fields were, and everybody else, there was a huge civil war there. The oil companies obviously benefited, funded these, rebel gangs, Al-Qaeda type, ISIS type gangs, to go and just everybody kill each other, and then the West will take the refugees. And so these refugees came into Australia, and I think at one point we were taking like 85,000 people a year coming in from Sudan, and a population of 20 million people. And they put them in this one area, in the same place, and most of them didn't speak English, and they come from a literal war zone, and where they have these religious practices like genital mutilation and stuff like that. And they had no interest in integrating with Australian society. They blamed the West and white people as their enemy for causing this havoc on their country, to which they have a point, I think, but, putting them all into one area where they didn't integrate, and suddenly everybody around them, they're living in areas where people don't even lock the doors in their house at night. Or if they go out to the shops, they leave the house unlocked because there's literally never been crime in that area. All of a sudden it goes to massive spikes in violent crimes, really, really nasty, terrible stuff. And, Australia, they took the guns away, and it's famously held up by advocates of gun control that, this could work if everyone hands their guns in. Well, Australia actually still has massive gun ownership. That doesn't get discussed. They just banned handguns. And they banned, magazine capacity above 3, I think it is. So there's still plenty of rifles. There's plenty of long guns in Australia. And if you do, pistol shooting in a target club, or you work for the police or something, you have a handgun. And then, of course, all the criminals have plenty of handguns. I mean, if they can bring drugs into the country, there's no problem for them to bring guns into the country. And in many cases, the reason it's so easy for them to bring the drugs and guns into the country is that, this is government agencies that are doing it under colour of law, as George says.
Oh, my God. You're so brilliant. You're so right. I mean, I'm so pro Second Amendment, and yeah, it would take a lot to pry my gun out of my hand, even though I am a peaceful person and I'm not even sure I could shoot the darn gun, but I can make a big noise with my shotgun. It's scary from, if you're coming in the door. Well,
it's a lot of fun. I'd recommend go get some training, go to a range. It's a great skill to have, and it's also, I find it pretty therapeutic.
Well, I find it very interesting that you're saying this about Australia, and of course it's what everyone says in America, right? If you take the guns away from the good people, then the bad people are still going to find a way to get them. No problem. I mean, that's going to happen. That's just how it works. It's so very, very interesting. I didn't know it was just their handguns. I happened to watch some documentaries.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the two major. It would be Hillary Clinton's wet dream that, first of all, everybody gives up handguns and assault rifles and semi-autos. Anything semi-autos has to be handed into the government. And then at the same time, we bring in immigrants from war zones and we just, put them all in one area and let them run rampant. But I mean, it's been extremely destructive to Australian society. As anyone in their right mind would see that would be the consequence of those two policies. And it's there. And so it's amazing to me that I hear it brought up in US politics as, a reason why we don't need a wall and we need gun control instead. I mean, I think countries should enforce their national borders, and that's pretty important. Hey, Linda, I've got about 5 minutes and then I'm going to have to go.
All right. Well, it's been a great day. Would you like to I know somebody wanted to just know, just before you leave, did you think this Pickard guy was part of a cult?
Yeah, well, I mean, he said he was extremely high up in the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. So, yeah, I mean, he was part of a cult, but there's this other guy, Gordon Todd Skinner, who's also in jail. They call him Hannibal Lecter in jail, and he was handing out free MDMA at Burning Man, like he had 343 grams of MDMA powder, handing it out, and he was also a DEA informant. So, he robbed a stereo, took it to Burning Man, a $100,000 sound system, handed out all of this free drugs, and then, skipped off and didn't return the stereo. So he was wanted by the cops, but the cops, they kept letting him go because he was involved in, I think, half a dozen DEA operations. And so these guys set up Pickard for him to take the fall. Pickard, in his defense, said that he was CIA and that he was actually trying to, do a deal to swap Stinger missiles for heroin in Afghanistan, which the CIA said, look, we were trying to do that deal, but not with this guy. He's not CIA. So they cut him off and distanced himself from him. And his defense basically wasn't accepted by the court, and he took the fall for it. But if you're part of that intelligence agency group and you're part of the high levels of this drug distribution group, I think that you are definitely in a cult. Like, to me, the intelligence agencies basically are cults, but they're also, in a huge overlap of members, for Freemasonry and OTO and things like that. That's where these secret societies like to operate in secret. So, within the worlds of crime and intelligence agencies, there's a huge overlap around the area of these secret societies.
Well, thank you for taking the time to answer that. He really wanted to know, and thank you so much for taking your time here. Gee, I feel like we only touched on the iceberg of on the top of, so much that we could talk about. But is there anything you'd like to close with or send people to?
Yeah, just, come to burners.me and look at my latest research. We've been looking into this guy, David Hawkins, and a lot of the claims that he's been making. He's joined up with Jason Goodman and he's attacking Abel Danger, who've, always been good to me and promoted my blog. And this is the guy who, he says, well, I wasn't the CEO of a company that flew drones over Chernobyl before the revolution. And in fact, he was the CEO of that company for years. And 2 weeks after the revolution, he was definitely provably the CEO. Was he at the time or not? To me, that seems like splitting hairs. But you be the judge, and that's what I do at burners.me, is I present evidence. So have a look at that post, Insane in the Ukraine, or the latest post about Lieutenant Squawkins and his sidekick Good Enough. And you'll see the evidence that, these people are out there saying that they're promoting truth on the internet and raising money from the suckers that believe that that's true and don't do their own research. So I'm trying to be the antidote to that, presenting the information and the evidence that people who do want to do their own research can check it out and decide for themselves. Burners.me.
Thank you so very, very much for your wisdom, for your time, for answering all these questions, and hopefully I'm going to improve on my equipment, and I would love to have you back. I'm sure everybody would love to ask you more questions another time, but thank you so much, Steve, really.
Thanks, Linda, and I should say subscribe to my YouTube channel, please. Crypto Beast, only small and growing. We need all the help we can get. Thanks very much. It's been great talking to you, Linda, and hope to do it again someday.
I would love that. And what is it? What's the name of your website again? Crypto Beast?
So the YouTube channel is Crypto Beast, all one word, CRYPTOBEAST.
Okay.
And the website is burners.me, BURNERS.ME.
Perfect. Yeah, I have that for people to look at. Great. Thank you so much for being here again, and have a wonderful, fabulous day.
Okay, thanks. You too. See you later.
Bye, Steve. All right. Now wow, that was really great. I don't know if Dave's still here because he could possibly come back in and talk to us, but let's see. I'm trying to switch the camera over, but it's not really working. So everybody, I guess we're just going to say goodbye for the day. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Wow, what a fun, interesting crowd. I really enjoyed hanging out with everybody, and wow, Steve's such a fascinating, interesting man. So thanks again, everybody, and have a wonderful high-frequency day, and, well, goodbye for now. Bye-bye.